Hey everyone, the Commander pre-constructed deck Rebellion Rising has just been previewed, so it's time to check out the brand new cards that you can find in the deck and give my thoughts on how good these cards are and how to best utilize them in the Commander format. But before we begin, two quick reminders. First off, you can purchase this pre-constructed deck and all the other Magic the Gathering cards that you need over at our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish, and be sure to ask for a scoop sticker in the order notes. And secondly, if you like this sort of preview content, then be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Alright, we begin with the face commander, Neyali Sun's Vanguard. This is a 4-mana Boros commander, 2 red and a white for a 3/3 legendary creature human rebel with 2 abilities. First ability is attacking tokens you control have double strike, and whenever one or more tokens you control attack a player, exile a top card of your library. During any turn you attack with a token, you may play that card. So this provides both a lot of extra damage with the double strike on all your tokens, and also a lot of card advantage. You're going to be essentially drawing up to 1 card per opponent, so in a 4-player game with 3 opponents, you can draw up to 3 cards per combat with your tokens, which is very good. Having both these abilities on a 4-mana creature is very, very good rate. Obviously, you have to be in a token deck for this to be really useful, and you have to go wide to get maximum value out of its second ability, but these 2 abilities put together for 4 mana is incredibly good. So what I expect to do with Neyali is basically go wide token deck. We have a lot of different ways of making tokens in Boros. Loyal Apprentice, for example, can just make a token every single turn before combat, and you can attack with it. It has evasion, so it's very easy to trigger the second part of the ability. You can also use other sorts of token generators like Coastline Marauders. The Encore ability makes a token for each opponent you control, and you can immediately swing with it. And it's going to be dealing a ton of damage, especially with the double strike from Neyali. So that's going to be a lethal swing for sure. And then we have even Myriad, such as Battle Angels of Tyr, where you attack one opponent and then you make a token copy attacking the other opponents. You won't get the second attack trigger off Neyali to draw extra cards off this. However, they will have double strike, so that's going to be fantastic for combat trigger abilities like Battle Angels, which means you can either draw more cards or make more treasure tokens or gain more life whenever you're attacking with your Myriad tokens. And you're also just going to be smacking them for 8 instead of 4. So that's going to be absolutely fantastic. And another thing you can take advantage of is the fact that you're doing basically impulse draw. You're casting spells from exile. So you pair this with something like Commander Liara Portier to make your exiled spells cast for much less mana. Wild Magic Sorcerer tacks on a free Cascade ability to the first exile spell you cast. And also Keeper of Secrets turns all those spells you cast from exile into extra damage that you can either do to take out opposing creatures or just start doming people in the face for extra damage that way as well. So Neyali is basically go wide tokens that also combines that with the sick impulse draw card advantage known to be in red and has a lot of support these days for it. So this is just a very good face commander. The second commander we have that is part of the 99 but can easily be swapped in as the lead commander of the deck is Otharri Sun's Glory. This is a 5-mana 3/3 legendary creature Phoenix with flying, lifelink, and haste. And whenever it attacks, you get an experience counter. Then you create a 2/2 red rebel creature token that's tapped and attacking for each experience counter you have. And you have another ability, activated ability, 2 red and a white, and tap an untapped rebel creature you control. Return Otharri from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So the classic Phoenix resurrection ability over here. All you have to do is tap an untapped rebel you control, and Otharri itself already makes a rebel creature token, so you don't really actually need to have that many rebels in your deck for you to just consistently bring back Otharri from the graveyard directly to the battlefield for a cheaper cost and get around the command tax if this is your commander. So if anything, Otharri is incredibly consistent. It's very hard to keep off the battlefield because it can so easily return itself to the battlefield for just 4 mana and tapping a rebel creature that it itself can make. And it is also a very consistent source of damage. It's going to swing, the first time it swings, it's hitting for up to 5 damage, and then every other subsequent combat, every single time it's attacking, is adding yet another rebel creature token tapped and attacking. So the first time, you're going to be attacking for 5, then you're going to be attacking for 7, then 9, etc., etc. And it's a great source of token generation at the same time. So what I expect to do with Otharri, well, I think Otharri works great with Breath of Fury. Any creature token generator that generates a token every single time it attacks is going to be amazing with Breath of Fury as basically a pseudo infinite win condition, as long as your creatures can't be blocked. So if you have any sort of mass evasion or mass flying or anything like that, any way of turning your rebel creature tokens into unblockable creatures, then you can easily go infinite with Otharri and Breath of Fury, and that's always really fun. You do have to have a rebel to get Otharri back onto the battlefield, so if you have if somebody wipes the board, for example, with like a Wrath of God effect, then you might not have a rebel on the battlefield anymore to bring back Otharri. So I think a cool tech will be Mutavault. It's a land, so it's very hard for your opponents to interact with it 9 times out of 10, but when you do actually need a rebel on the battlefield to return Otharri back to the battlefield, you can just pay 1, and now it's suddenly a rebel on the battlefield, and then you can just tap it and pay the other 4 mana to get Otharri back onto the battlefield from the graveyard. So it's a very consistent way of getting around the command tax. And the other thing that I thought was really cool, since Otharri does deal with experience tokens, I could see it as an amazing card in the 99 of Kalemni, Disciple of Iroas. It says whenever you cast a creature spell converted mana cost or mana value 5 or greater, you get an experience counter, and Otharri is 5 or greater, so it already triggers Kalemni herself, and Kalemni gets +1/+1 for each experience counter you have. So with Otharri is a very fantastic way of generating additional experience counters in Boros. If you have Otharri in the 99 of Kalemni, Kalemni gets huge very, very quickly. So I really like the combination here. Either Kalemni in the 99 or Otharri in the 99, both are going to be super sweet tech together. Next up, we have a new removal protection spell with Clever Concealment. It's 2 and double white, and it says any number of non-land permanents you control phase out. So if somebody tries to mass wipe the board with a destroy effect or even an exile effect, or even like Cyclonic Rift trying to do a mass bounce effect, if you just phase out all the non-land permanents you don't want to be removed from the battlefield, that's probably the safest way of protecting yourself from basically any sort of mass removal. 4 mana at instant for this effect is a lot, and thankfully it has a way of making it much cheaper with a Convoke ability. Your creatures can help cast a spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 or 1 mana of that creature's color. So if you tap 2 white creatures and then 2 any other creatures, you can cast this for free, and that makes it incredibly powerful in a go wide token strategy, especially one that's white focused. Comparing Clever Concealment to other forms of mass board wipe protection in Boros, we have something like Guardian of Faith, which is always going to be 3 mana, but it only protects your other creatures, not other non-land permanents. I think this card is fantastic, though, and super reliable. Then the best version, the king of board wipe protection, is Teferi's Protection. Not only does it phase out all your creatures for 3 mana at all time, but it also makes you basically immune from dying because you just can't take damage and you have protection from everything. For 2 mana, for a little bit less, you have Boros Charm, which makes everything indestructible until end of turn, and that's going to protect you from like 99% of all things other than like Cyclonic Rift and Farewell, which are the most common sorts of board wipes that can get around Boros Charm, Mass Exile or Mass Bounce. But probably Boros Charm and Teferi's Protection are going to still be the best in a Boros Go Wide deck, but then I would say Clever Concealment is going to be a fantastic third option. And to be honest, if you're in a Go Wide deck, your primary concern is going to be board wipe protection because you have to commit so much to the board. So Clever Concealment I can see being a fantastic new occlusion in any sort of Go Wide style white deck. Next up, we have a new equipment with Glimmer Lens. This is 2, 1 and a white artifact equipment for Mirrodin, which is a brand new mechanic with the set. When this equipment enters the battlefield, you create a 2/2 red rebel creature token, then attach this to it, and whenever equipped creature and at least one other creature attack, draw a card, and has equip 1 and a white. So for 2 mana, you have a creature that whenever the equipped creature and at least one other creature attack, you draw a card. That's a fine rate, and you can move that equipment around either if the creature dies or if you just want to put it on an evasive creature or what have you afterwards. This is a very solid rate. It's not anything crazy that we haven't seen before, but it's very good, and the fact that the equipment comes with a creature is particularly useful. Comparing it to other options that we currently have, I think the best card forever is Mask of Memory that came out in the original Mirrodin block, 2 and equip 1, and you get to draw 2 and then discard 1, which is just so good. And then there's Rogue's Glove, which lets you draw a card if you deal combat damage to a player, which doesn't require a second creature to attack, but it does need to be unblocked, and it doesn't come with a free 2/2 creature attached to it. So you can see Glimmer Lens is a pretty solid card overall, and something that I would definitely recommend running in equipment-focused decks. Next, we have another equipment, Kemba's Banner. It's 3 and a white for an artifact equipment for Mirrodin, and equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control, and it has equipped 2 and a white, so 3 mana total. So this is going to just pump up one creature really, really large if you are in a go wide style deck. If you're a go wide equipment deck, then this is obviously a must include. But if you're in any sort of go wide deck and you want to have just one creature get huge, then Kemba's Banner is going to be a fantastic way of doing this. The other commanders that I was thinking of that fit really well with Kemba is unsurprisingly both Kembas that we've seen. Kemba Ka Regent puts a 2/2 cat creature token onto the battlefield for each equipment attached to Kemba on your upkeep. So if you have like 5 equipment on Kemba, then each upkeep you're going to make 5 creature tokens. So this is going to make the Kemba's Banner very, very powerful very quickly. Also, Kemba Ka Enduring, when it or another cat enters the battlefield under your control, you can equip your equipment to it for free, and it can generate creature tokens for 5 mana. So if you're going go wide, then Kemba's Banner is going to be fantastic. If you're go wide equipment like Kemba Ka Regent, then this card is going to be fantastic for you. Next up, we have another source of card draw in white. This is Staff of the Storyteller. This is 1 and a white, so 2 mana total for an artifact that says when it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white spear creature token with flying. And whenever you create 1 or more creature tokens, put a story counter on Staff of the Storyteller, and you can pay 1 white and tap it, remove a story counter from Staff of the Storyteller, and draw a card. So when Staff of the Storyteller enters the battlefield, you're making a token, and you're immediately putting a story counter on it because you made a token with the staff, and then you can draw at least 1 card off it. That's not very good by itself, but obviously if you're in any style of token deck, or any style of creature token deck rather, you're going to be making tokens very consistently, and you're going to be putting story counters on Staff of the Storyteller very consistently. So if you're in any sort of creature token deck that is in white, this is a very solid source of incremental card draw. Obviously you have to pay 1 white every single time you're activating it, so it's not like super efficient or anything like that. And we have other versions of this type of card before. The best one is obviously Idol of Oblivion. It does the exact same thing as Staff of the Storyteller essentially, but it counts any style of tokens, so treasure tokens or clue tokens or what have you, and it doesn't cost any mana whatsoever to activate it, so it's just more efficient than Staff of the Storyteller. But if you're in basically any token deck, creature token deck that generates a lot of tokens very consistently, but maybe needs more sources of card advantage, especially if you're in mono white. So something like Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, this is just going to be a fantastic staple, I would say. If you're in green, like if you're in Selesnya or your Boros or something like that, you might have enough card advantage options that Staff of the Storyteller is not what you're looking for, but for 9 times out of 10, I would probably just jam this into basically any creature token deck, and then think about maybe cutting it if my card draw options outside of white are just too good. But 9 times out of 10, I'm thinking Staff of the Storyteller, just gas. Next, we have a card that I'm super stoked for. It's Goldwardens Gambit. It's 6 and double red, which is a lot for a sorcery, even in Commander, but it has affinity for equipment, so it costs 1 less to cast for each equipment you control. So if you control up to 6 equipment, then this costs as low as just 2 red mana to cast a spell. It creates 5 2/2 red rebel creature tokens. They gain haste until end of turn. For each of those tokens, you may attach an equipment you control to it. So this is a fantastic late game finisher for an equipment deck. This is particularly powerful after a creature board wipe. Like if you lose all your creatures and you just have equipment around, you can cast Goldwardens Gambit, and then suddenly you have a bunch of creatures, they have haste, and they automatically equip, so you even get around the steep equip cost that's usually associated with equipment, and then you just immediately swing in, and hopefully that's going to be enough to win you the game. If not, you just have an army of equipped creatures that can continue swinging in every single turn there isn't another board wipe. So I expect this card to be really powerful in equipment decks that want to go wide with their creatures. Something like Otharri for Fearless Voyager or Sir Gwyn, Hero of Ashvale, which can draw a card basically for each equipped creature that's attacking. Otharri is basically one per opponent, so you can draw 3 cards per turn if you're attacking with Goldwardens Gambit, 1 for each opponent. And Sir Gwyn says whenever an equipped creature you control attacks, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So up to 5 equipped creatures are now attacking with Goldwardens Gambit. You're going to be drawing 5 cards and losing 5 life, which is just fantastic with Sir Gwyn. Next up, we have one of the strongest new equipments. This is Hexplate Wallbreaker. It's an expensive one. It's 3 and double red, so it's 5 mana and only in red for an artifact equipment that says 4 Mirrodin. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, and whenever equipped creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap each attacking creature. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase and has an equip of 4 mana, 3 and a red. So it's a lot of mana, but the payoff is you get an extra combat phase up to 1 because it has to be the first combat phase of the turn. But extra combats are just so powerful in Commander. It turns basically a normal style of attack into a lethal finisher. It doubles your combat triggers. Like a lot of equipments just happen to have combat triggers if you deal damage with like a Sword of Feast and Famine or whatever sword you have. There's always a combat trigger associated to that, so you double those. You're doubling the amount of damage you're dealing, which is the most important part. You're doubling attack triggers, like Sword of the Animus. There's just so many things that you're doubling with an extra combat that is just so powerful in Commander and highly underrated, I think, in Commander. So it's well worth the cost. It's 5 mana up front, then an additional 4 to equip if you want to move it off the token. But all of that aside, it's just very, very good. And if you have any ways of cheating on the mana cost, like a Stoneforge Mystic, or if you have any ways of cheating on the equip cost, like Sigarda's Aid or Pure Steel Paladin, then Hexplate Wallbreaker just gets better and better. Next, we have one of the strongest cards for a go-wide token deck, Roar of Resistance. And this card is just straight gas. It's 1 and a red. So 1 and red, 2 mana for an enchantment that says creature tokens you control have haste. And whenever 1 or more creatures attack, you may pay 1 and a red. If you do, creatures attacking your opponents and or planeswalkers they control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Now keep in mind the second ability doesn't have to be tokens that are attacking. It doesn't even have to be your own creatures. If your opponents are attacking and you just say, hey, if you're not attacking me, I'll spend 2 mana and I'll give an Anthem effect for your creatures. That's just gas for you. That's extra damage for your end of the battlefield. That's amazing. The fact that you're doing both of these 2 things though, creature tokens have haste, and you have a mini Anthem effect whenever you have 2 mana to spare. It's just fantastic for a 2-drop enchantment. That's just so good. Like if you compare it to Fervor, for example, which is the classic baseline, all creatures you control have haste. That's great for 3 mana. That's still very playable in Commander to this day in 2023. But for 2 mana, if you're just a token deck and you just want your tokens to have haste, you can shave off 1 mana. You can just be 2-drop with Roar of the Resistance, and that's fantastic. And then on top of that, you have this powerful Anthem effect that is just so good for go-wide token strategies. So 2 decks that I was thinking about immediately when I saw Roar of the Resistance was Krenko Mob Boss, obviously. You can just tap Krenko on your turn, and suddenly all your creatures have haste. And it's an Anthem effect, so it makes it that much easier to kill people with combat with Krenko. And also Jetmir, Nexus of Revels. You don't have to just be mono red or Boros for this. You can be Naya too. And Jetmir just loves go wide with tokens. And Roar of the Resistance is just fantastic to make sure the tokens that you're generating each turn can immediately attack. And you can pump them up even further with the Anthem. This card is just straight gas. Just amazing. And then finally, the last new card from the Precon is Vulshok Factory. This is 2 and a red for an artifact, and it's a new, basically, mana rock. You can tap it to add 1 red and put a charge counter on Vulshok Factory, and you can pay 3 mana, 2 a red and tap it, so essentially 4 mana because it itself taps for 1 red. Sacrifice Vulshok Factory, create an XX colors golem artifact creature token of haste, where X is the number of charge counters on Vulshok Factory, activate only as a sorcery. So a lot of people poo-poo on mana rocks that are 3 or greater in Commander. They basically say they're unplayable. You always want to focus on like 0 to 2 mana rocks. And for the most part, yes, a lot of the 2 mana rocks are going to be just better than 3 mana rocks. However, there are going to be some exceptions to the rule, and I feel like Wizards of the Coast has done a good job lately of making 3 mana cost rocks that tap for only 1 mana and are worth it because they bring something else to the table. One of the best 3 mana rocks, one of the best mana rocks in general in Commander, I will say, just throwing my hat out there, especially in like casual play, is Cursed Mirror. It's a 3 mana rock. It only taps for 1 red, but it enters the battlefield as a clone until end of turn, so it can copy like Eternal Witnesses and stuff like that. Any powerful ETB effect, or basically any powerful big creature that you can immediately attack with haste. It's great. It's like an amazing card, and I think people are definitely sleeping on it. Like if they think anything that is like 3 or more is unplayable, then you're really missing out on Cursed Mirror. Now that said, not all the 3 mana rocks are as good as Cursed Mirror. I think it's one of the best, if not the best. Like Glittering Stockpile, I think is much worse. It taps for 1 red, and you put a stash counter on it, and you can immediately sacrifice it to make more than just 1 red for that turn. I use it in Purphos, and I absolutely love it there. Vulshok Factory, same thing, where it's just tapping for 1 red, and then eventually it can turn it into a scary threat if enough turns pass. So if you play this on turn 3 or something, and the game goes to like turn 8 or 9, then yes, eventually you get to have a big creature golem on the battlefield to smash face with. That said, I don't think it's very strong. However, I do like the fact that Wizards of the Coast keeps making 3 mana rocks that have cool secondary abilities that make it more enticing. I wouldn't personally play it in most decks. There has to be 1 or 2 decks I'm sure that it will be actually good for. Maybe some decks that actually like the charge counter aspect of it much more than anything else that the card is doing. But it is cool, and I like the fact that it was made. And that's it for all the brand new cards that you can find in the new pre-constructed deck, Rebellion Rising. The next thing I'm going to do with this deck is do, as always, a Precon upgrade guide of $20. And you can find that over at mtggoldfish.com. I'm going to have it as an article, maybe do it as a video as well. I'm not quite sure, but it will be going up next week, early next week. Come back soon, wherein the other pre-constructed deck is going to be revealed, and we're going to be covering the brand new cards from that deck as well. And until next time, friends, see ya!